we go. So I'm starting with a nice little picture produced by James Whistler, American artist in about 1860, I think it was. He was in London and observing things. So this is the old Hungerford Bridge, which crosses the River Thames. It's a Brunel bridge built in 1835, I think it was. Just a pedestrian footbridge to get from the south side of the river to the north side. But it was then, some of you may know where it is. There's now a new Hungerford Bridge has been built as a railway bridge there. So this old Hungerford Bridge was designed by Brunel, and I say it was 1835, and it's dismantled in about 1860, 1865. You may sort of think it sort of looks familiar, and I'll show you an old photo of it. So this is a photo from 1840 or 50. Quite a nice suspension bridge, some big masonry piers to support it and towers to support the cables. The reason it might look familiar is that the cables have been reused. So I don't quite know how the conversation went between Brunel and John Hawkshaw, who designed the replacement bridge, but the cables have been reused at the Clifton Suspension Bridge. So they're in service at London for 25, 30 years or so, and then they got taken down, and they've been in place ever since, whatever it is, 150 odd years in Bristol, still going strong. And if we also just go back to the masonry piers, they've also been incorporated into the new bridge. You can see them at either end of this new 1860s bridge. Anyway, my point of all of this is that reuse is not new. It's been going on for many years. However, we recently seem to have moved to a more consumerist society, disposal of things, and forgotten almost how to reuse things. Anyway, right, quick bit about us. So I'm Andy Yates from the Engineers Reuse Collective. So we're a group set up, a not-for-profit group set up of practicing engineers to, well, it says there, champion, accelerate, and deliver reuse in the built environment. And we want to push for more and more reuse in the built environment. Oh, there you go. There's a collective of minds on positive action and empowerment. These are our aims of what we're trying to do to promote and implement reuse by sharing knowledge, things, demonstrating that we can do it. We want to champion, which includes challenging, encouraging, and championing people we work with to push for more and more reuse. And we want to advocate for, as a collective voice, that engineers need to be doing more and more reuse. And these are our members. So we've got, quite a wide range of some very large companies, very small companies, a whole range who are all together. We're pushing for, we want to be doing more reuse. And how do we do that? So a bit of context to the whole thing. Here we go. Right. So this is a diagram of how much stuff we have in the UK. This is UK material in infrastructure. So roads, rail, and buildings are the categories they've used. This is everything. And each square there is 10 megatons of stuff. 10 megatons, because it's fun, is 700,000 double-decker buses. So there's a lot of stuff, 1.8 gigatons of stuff. And you can see there, just over, I think it's about 60% is in roads, and the majority of that is aggregate. But in buildings, there's 7.3 gigatons of stuff, and about half of that is concrete. There's quite a lot of bricks and some iron and steel and some other bits. That's where we are at the moment, roughly. And if we look at how much material we're putting in there, so this is the annual material flow. So every year at the moment, we take out about 60 megatons of demolition waste, most of which does get recovered as aggregate. So some goes to waste, but in the scale of this, yes, about the same goes in. But we then have 370 megatons of stuff goes into this pile every year. So there's a net inflow of 310 megatons of stuff, which I worked out in my double-decker bus analogy. It's 21 million double-decker buses every year. So a lot of stuff. And then if we look at waste, so the construction demolition sector produces by far the largest amount of waste. So on the top left there, that's construction, demolition and excavation waste generation, 132 megatons a year. And you can see the 60 megatons is mineral waste from construction and demolition. And where that all goes on the right-hand side of this diagram is pretty much it goes to recovery, which slightly annoyingly in the statistics is just recovery. They don't differentiate in how it is, but as we've seen, it's predominantly just aggregate being, I'm going to possibly slightly controversially say, it's effectively landfill, but we're putting the landfill underneath our roads and our car parks. Anyway, you will probably have recognized this. This is from the I/D, the hierarchy of net zero design, which is basically use less stuff. We need to be using less stuff, and that starts with building nothing, building less, and building clever. And I've also got a reuse hierarchy where what we really should be doing is keeping things at their highest value for as long as possible. So retain is the best thing to do, then repair it, refurbish it, and so on. And as you move down this hierarchy, you are generating increasing amounts of waste, and you're using increasing amounts of other external inputs and resources and energy and so on. So we really need everything to be as high up the reuse hierarchy as we can manage. Oh, right. So a bit of academic stuff. This is a model for barriers and success factors on reuse, which came out of a Norwegian study into looking at the construction industry there and how, well, effectively, as I say, with barriers and success factors for reuse. So they've divided it into 4 areas. There's a legal framework which requires regulation and so on and planning. There's a business framework of doing stuff, infrastructure so that materials can be reused and so on. But the key one, particularly as us as structural engineers, and I'm with the Engineers Reuse Collective hat on, is the mindset and knowledge. We need to be having the right mindset and the right knowledge to be able to reuse things. And the way they play this model is they have this model as this is the barriers to reuse, but they also frame it as this is the success factors to reuse. So our work on the Reuse Collective is to be making sure that the engineers have the right mindset and knowledge to be able to move the reuse forward. So and then a bit more context. There are some ethical and philosophical questions which I'm not going to answer here, but they're there to get people to think, and this is what we need engineers to be thinking about. So what will future generations say about how wasteful we are, and how can we justify consuming all these amounts of new materials? Maybe, have we got enough already? You might say that 1.8 gigatons of stuff is enough. And then there's a sort of hypothetical question, like, if we had no new materials to build from, what can we do with what we've already got? And then, of course, a couple of quotes, which I'm sure you've seen, but the greenest building is the one that already exists. And then the future is already built. We just need to unlock its potential. So I'm going to just, I'm now going to talk about some skills that we need, which was the question I set. And John and Richard have also talked about this a lot. But so technical skills, we need to know the basics of structural design and how materials behave. This is exactly the same as for other things. So yeah, steel, concrete, masonry, timber, and other things, and learn how those work. To me, though, far more important thing at the moment is the non-technical skills. And I've got a couple of slides on this because it's just difficult to put pictures to. The mindset. We need to have the mindset of what can we do differently and how can we use what we already have. We know how materials behave. We know how structural forms work, but we just have to think, we can do this with what we've got, for example. Culture as well. So the culture of the industry, and this is the whole of the sort of construction industry, it's got too used to, well, it's easier just to knock it down and we'll build something new. we have to change that culture. So, yeah, my view of engineers need to be speaking up to promoting the change and saying we should do things differently, and challenge others to see if we can do things differently. And this starts at all levels. So within our companies and wherever we're working, we can challenge those we're working with. We can challenge our bosses and say, why are you telling me to do that? But we can also do it within design teams and project teams. And well, every time we interact with somebody in the construction industry, we should say, why aren't we doing it better? Collaboration. So we do need to share what we've done and what's how things can be reused better. But at the moment, this is especially on lessons learned. Maybe somebody's tried something and it hasn't worked. It's one of the sort of key things that we're doing at the Engineers Reach Collective is getting engineers together to share what hasn't worked. Often projects which are successful get publicized really well, fantastic. When it didn't go quite so well, and it could even be something like, well, the client just said, no, I'm not going to reuse the building. But there's still lessons which can be learned from that, and those we need to share so that we can find ways to overcome them. And then I've got on here awareness as well, speaking up and engaging with everyone we work with to push for more and more reuse. I kind of sum this all up as thinking differently. So I'll summarize it there. Why can't we do things differently? How can we reuse what we already have? And then challenging those we work with. So, I mean, one which comes up quite a lot is engineers not necessarily confident to be challenging their clients and the briefs. And there's quite often, actually, well, clients, organizations, companies have their own ESG policies and targets. And that's a great place to go and look. And so then you can turn around and say, hey, I'm Mr. Client. You say you were going to do this in here. So this would help you achieve that. Which I think is quite good fun. Yeah, share knowledge and then have a positive mindset. I'm going to get some pictures in a minute, I think. Oh, yeah, there we go. So overall, yeah, engineers understand materials and structural principles, but are engaged with the climate emergency and the role a structural engineer can play, particularly in reusing materials and using less stuff. But they need to have the confidence to speak up and they need to think differently. Okay, I've got some sort of examples and some case studies of things that just to show what has been doing. So those material pictures I showed you earlier were actually all reuse examples, and I'm going to show you some of them now. Reuse of steel. This should be pretty easy. Steel's nice pieces. It stays, relative strength, doesn't deteriorate as long as it's looked after. Can be reused. So this is taking some steel from a 1930s steel from a department store in central London, which then got, which you can see on the top right, and has been cleaned up, reused, as you can see on the left-hand side. And the holes you can see are where the original shelf angles were, which were holding up the original floor planks. Often people say you can't reuse steel from before 1970. You can. You just have to think how to do it. This is an example project from Finland, actually, this one. This is where they have done a project to dismantle a precast building to salvage all the components to be able to reuse them. So it's actually a large EU-funded project which they're looking at, but they've managed to get, I think, 260 pieces out, ready for reuse, just dismantle the building. This is some other reuse of concrete examples, so not easy to get photos of this, but lots of things you can do with concrete, if you just think about it. It can be used as spreaders effectively underneath to make up pad foundations, void formers in raft slabs, lintels, beam block stair treads, king post wall pieces. There's a whole range of things. It's concrete. It's got very good compressive strength. We can do stuff with it. Timber. So this was a smallish project where I think it's a museum where they took the existing roof off to build a new extension, but they saved all the timber joists and they used them as the sarking boards on the new roof. There's my picture of the brickwork. So this is in Denmark. Brick obviously is very time consuming and therefore expensive these days to clean up all the bricks and reuse them. So they said, well, we'll just cut the bricks into panels and we'll reuse the panels as a whole. So it's effectively creating a new structural component, but made up of bricks. It's just thinking about how you can use what you've got. Other people say you can't use reuse doesn't work on small projects. This is a very small domestic extension with a fairly standard steel box picture frame type thing on the extension. It's reused steel, it's reclaimed steel. And then my final example is possibly one of the most I think impressive things that they're doing at the moment. This is it's a development in central London, and they're doing almost everything you can think of. So the foundations are being reused. Part of it's, so the facade's being kept, but the foundations underneath are kept, and there's a whole new set of load paths. So there's a little bit of foundation enhancement, but keep the foundations. There was a 1970s, I think it was, extension on the back, which is steel frame. They've taken that to pieces to reuse all the steel in the new, in the development. Some of the floors, they are moving up and down. They've gone, oh, actually, what, rather than take the floor out and put it and build a new one, whatever, 400 mil higher, why don't we just detach the floor from the columns and jack it up and then use it? So they're doing that. They're actually jacking the facade up and down as well to match to get the windows to match. Sort of almost everything you can think of. They've gone, well, yeah, the client on this, I think, was very good and said, I want you to keep as much as you can. And the engineers took that as a great little challenge to what can we do and keep everything. So there's a whole range of things. It's just thinking differently. So there we go. My final thoughts on this. So we have the technical skills and we're very good at solving problems. And we're very creative as well. But we just need to apply that and what we do. But predominantly we need to change our mindsets and those we work with, and we need to think differently. I've whizzed through that. So thank you very much.